I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you aboard tonight. Day 2 here at Court TV of the brand new trial. We've got gavel-to-gavel coverage all day long. If you missed it, don't worry, folks. You're going to be right up to speed in just a few moments. This is a case involving a woman who is accused of taking part in the murder of her husband's ex-girlfriend. Okay? So her husband has a baby with a woman. They split up. There's a bitter battle over this child, a custody battle. And what ends up happening is the mother of the child ends up murdered. Well, Erica Stefanko, the defendant in this case, her husband pleaded guilty years ago to committing the murder. But prosecutors, investigators do not believe that he did it alone, that Erica Stefanko played a key role in all of it. And then, today in the courtroom, it was the convicted murderer who testified remotely against his former wife, Erica Stefanko. Dramatic moment inside the courtroom. Let's take a listen.
What did you hear Erica say on that phone call?
Objection.
Overruled.
I remember her saying somebody else's name. I remember it was a Jennifer or Katie, and it was Mick something. Like how you say McDonald's, I don't remember what she said the last name was. And I remember she ordered a pizza. And I remember it struck me as bizarre because she ordered a half pepperoni and mushroom pizza. A short time later, Ashley showed up.
What was she driving?
Her car.
And did her car have any Domino's, I guess, markings on it?
No, sir.
Where were you when you first saw the car?
Somewhere in the, I think I was just walking around in circles. So I remember I was fairly close to the tree.
And you knew that Ashley was on her way there, didn't you?
After Erica made that phone call and came over.
So you were waiting for Ashley?
Sir, I wasn't necessarily waiting for Ashley. I was stuck there.
Did you have any intentions of buying that pizza that night?
I didn't know it was ordered, and I had no intention of buying it, or buying one.
You didn't know it was ordered? I thought you said that Erica ordered a pizza on the phone.
Yes, sir, but up until that point, I didn't know that she was going to be doing so.
What did you do with Ashley's body?
When I had to leave, I picked her up and put her in the car.
Whose car?
Ashley's car.
What part of the car did you put her in?
In the back seat.
And when you put her in the back seat, did she have anything on her that was placed on her that she didn't have on her when she arrived?
Yes, there was.
What was on her?
A zip tie.
How many?
I only remember one. I remember one around her neck.
Is it fair to say that Ashley did not leave that parking lot alive that night?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter was in the courtroom all day, is joining us now live from Akron, Ohio. It's not often that you get admitted murderers to testify in a case. It's even more rare that they testify against their now ex-wife. Unbelievable moment, Chanley.
It really was, and what made this so engaging to the jurors, because he was testifying virtually, so they really had to sort of lean in to the screens to watch him testify. And it was a little bit inhibiting because he does have a mask over his face. He's not there in person to see his mannerisms, to see what his eyes are doing when he's telling his story. So I did notice that the jurors were even more in tune trying to judge or look towards his credibility of what he was saying. And they were also very much looking towards Erica Stefanko, who was in the courtroom, and she was active, taking notes at the defense counsel table, talking to her lawyer throughout this testimony, and also holding holding a photo of her children the entire time her ex-husband Chad Cobb is testifying against her. He spent a little more than 2 hours on the witness stand today under direct examination, some revelations throughout the day, some big moments and accusations to his ex-wife.
So, I mean, what's the status of their relationship, to give us a little bit of perspective of all this? Because it's a little complicated, and I think the defense would say that Chad Cobb maybe is a little bitter towards his former wife.
You know, I think that would be a fair assessment. There were a lot of times defense counsel would object to his responses as being non-responsive or to strike something from the record that he would say voluntarily. I believe at one point when he talks about Erica Stefanko allegedly placing the pizza order, he adds a little remark there saying, yes, she ordered half mushroom, half pepperoni pizza, and she was smiling while she did it. And of course the defense successfully had that stricken from the record, and it was multiple times throughout that he would add a little bit more about Erica Stefanko in his testimony. That was clearly something that was noticeable to everyone sitting in the courtroom. But as far as the evidence, it was clear, both with the testimony of his mother, Cindy Cobb, earlier and in the afternoon, and with his testimony that it was quite acrimonious between Erica Stefanko and Chad Cobb after he went to jail and then pled guilty to the murder of Ashley Biggs. And then he finds out that she's with his best friend, he files for divorce, and then she withholds children from coming to see him or his parents, and that leads him, according to his testimony, to finally cooperate with prosecutors and implicate her.
It's unreal. So she's with Chad. Chad used to be with Ashley, and Ashley, you know, they split up. Ashley's with someone else. And then the two couples are going at it. And then when he pleads guilty to the murder of Ashley Biggs, she divorces him and marries his best friend. Wow.
She does, indeed, Vinny. In fact, testimony today is that it was less than a month after he was arrested for the murder of Ashley Biggs that his best friend, Mike Stefanko, moved into his home where he lived with his wife and lived with Erica Stefanko and then eventually marries her. Erica Stefanko has a child with Mike Stefanko. In fact, she's pregnant before her husband, Chad Cobb, is sentenced for his plea for murdering Ashley Biggs.
Unreal drama, and you talk about credibility. Why are people doing things? Let's take a listen to Chad Cobb talking about why he pleaded guilty.
You had mentioned that you took the plea and mentioned it in relation to your kids. I asked you,
yes, sir,
what did you mean by that? You said, where do I start? I want you to start with a very
yes,
the basic short answer and tell me what that had to do or how your kids were related to you accepting this plea.
Beth Judge came into the county jail when I was in there and said that if I don't plead guilty and resolve this case by every means necessary, that I will lose them.
So am I getting this right, Chanley, that he pleads guilty because if he admits that he's a murderer, he gets to keep his kids, whereas if he goes to trial and says, I didn't do it, and says he's innocent, he would have lost his kids?
That seemed to be his reasoning back in 2012. In fact, he gives three main reasons. The first is to avoid the death penalty. The second would be to save his kids. He is being told some information at the time that if he doesn't plead guilty, that the state would move to terminate his parental rights, that he would no longer be the father of his children. They would go into foster care. In fact, they were already in foster care. That was the testimony today. But that they would be adopted out, that he would lose his children. And that was something that concerned him. And the third reason was to make sure Erica Stefanko stayed out of prison to ensure the facilitation of their children and her parental rights. That was testimony from Cindy Cobb today, the recording that Cindy Cobb made, and of course he confirmed it again in his testimony. So those main reasons, but that seems to be why the main reason he took that plea, Vinny, back in 2012, because he feared that his kids would be adopted to other families.
This is, and it gets a little complicated, right? So he has a child, a daughter with Ashley Biggs, the woman that he murdered, right? Do we know how many children he had with Erica Stefanko, the woman that he allegedly committed the murder with, that he's now testifying against?
They had 2 children together. Now, Stefanko brought a child into the marriage, and of course, Cobb brought a child into the marriage, who was Ashley Biggs' daughter, and they had 2 together. And testimony today, Vinny, was from Chad Cobb that during each almost step of what he said happened to Ashley Biggs the night of June 2012, the kids, all 4 of those kids, were in tow in the vehicle. Erica Stefanko was driving around to the scene that Ashley Biggs was murdered, delivered the pizza, was murdered, to the home and the cornfield where her car was left, back to their home, back to the crime scene, back to the grandparents' house. The kids were all in tow. He said they were 2.5 months old, 2 years old, and 2 6-year-olds in the car.
This is unreal. The picture that's being painted of what happened here. A woman is lured to her murder by delivering a pizza because she works at Domino's. They lure her there, allegedly. They've got all the kids in the car, commit the murder, and are driving around with the kids and picking up the murderer after he drops off the victim's car. This is insanity. Now, Chad Cobb also spoke about why he's implicating his now ex-wife who's with his best friend. Let's take a listen.
And then did you ever have contact with Detective Hitchings again?
Yes, sir.
And when would that have been, if you remember?
I wrote him in 2017 when I couldn't see. FC and KC.
All right. And then did Detective Hitchings come and talk to you?
Yes, he did.
And you gave him information at that time regarding Erica's involvement?
We spoke a little bit, yes, sir.
Again, Chanley, he's doing it all for the kids. He's testifying against the mother of 2 of his children because he couldn't see the kids. Is that what's going on right now?
It has come full circle. That was his testimony today, that originally when he pled guilty in 2012-13, that he didn't implicate Stefanko. The state tried to turn him over as evidence for them, and he refused. And then again in 2014, even after he'd moved to divorce Stefanko, he didn't cooperate with the lead detective on the case, and that was because she was still bringing the kids around. He was able to see his children, his parents were able to see his children, but that all changed in 2017 when Erica Stefanko started withholding visitation, and that was sort of a leverage, that was a testimony today, over him, and that's when he decided he would cooperate with Detective Hitchings.
Unbelievable. So this testimony, huge. But there was another big witness. We had like 2 Cobbs today. It's like a Cobb salad in the courtroom today, because Cindy Cobb, Chad's mother, also testified about a conversation she had with the defendant, Erica Stefanko, and a recorded conversation as well. Let's take a listen to some of her testimony from today.
During the pendency of his case, did you still have communications with Erica?
Yes.
And did those communications involve discussions regarding what happened the night that Ashley died?
Occasionally.
All right. And what types of things was she telling you about that?
They were all together, and that she had placed the call to arrange for the pizza and the meeting place.
For the pizza and?
The meeting place.
The meeting place.
I'm not trying to manipulate anyone. I'm not trying to anybody. I'm just wanting to go forward and raise the kids. At one time, you told me face to face that you made the phone call and you set the meeting up. That you had told me, and there's no lie in that. Like I said, Chad said this is what we're going to do, and this is your part of it, and I carried out my part of it. I did exactly what he told me to do. And it wasn't because he was forcing me to do it, or like he had a gun to my head. It was because he said this is your part, and this is what you're going to do.
All right, the acoustic's a little tough on that recording, but that recording is from 2014, right? So that's not like a year ago. This is closer to the time of the murder. Why is Chad's mother making that recording, number one? And what exactly is allegedly admitted in that conversation?
Well, Cindy Cobb testified today that this was from March 2014, that the defendant, Erica Stefanko, had requested a meeting in person with Cindy Cobb because they were having those issues of from time to time, Stefanko would withhold the children from the grandparents and from going to see their father in prison. And so this was an opportunity for Cindy Cobb to sit her down and talk about things, and she pressed record, Vinny, on this conversation. And in this conversation, it's 3 hours long. The transcript is 200 pages, but just to give you an idea, what we just played there is that she's saying, she's not denying that she did call Domino's and place that order in June 2012, but she also says things like, quote, "If everything had been told exactly as it happened, then we'd both be in prison right now," talking about the murder of Ashley Biggs. And she says further, it took two of us, quote, "and the situation naturally was because of me." That's just a little bit of what this jury heard today. The prosecution playing almost 17 different clips of that conversation for the jury to hear, and they were taking note of it.
Wow, a huge day inside the courtroom. What's up for tomorrow?
It will be another huge day, Vinny. We're going to hear from in the morning, most likely the manager of the Domino's Pizza where Ashley Biggs worked back in 2012. We will likely hear from Mary Brinkman. We keep hearing that name being brought up, and the prosecutor in opening statement said that she also will testify about Stefanko's own words, admitting that she drove Cobb to the crime scene where Ashley Biggs was murdered, and then they allegedly hid out at his grandparents' house. And then, of course, we have the all-important cross-examination of Chad Cobb to take place in the afternoon. He's testifying remotely from prison. And we even may get to the minor child at the heart of this case, Ashley Biggs' daughter, Chad Cobb's daughter, who will testify against her former stepmother.
All right, another big day inside the courtroom. Chanley Painter will be there. She needs to get a little bit of rest right now, folks. Coverage begins 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thanks so much, Chanley.